Marcus stood on the corner, the sharp autumn wind whipping around him. His coat, thin and worn, did little against the chill that seemed to seep directly into his bones. In his arms, bundled tightly against his chest, 6-month-old Liam stirred, a soft whimper escaping his lips before settling back into a fitful sleep. Marcus adjusted his hold, the familiar weight a constant anchor in a life that often felt adrift. This corner, this bench near the park, was his temporary sanctuary. It was a place where the noise of the city faded slightly, where the biting wind felt a little less harsh than the stares he sometimes caught. Life hadn't been easy since his wife, Clara, had passed. Every day was a navigation of grief, exhaustion, and the fierce, protective love he felt for his son. He worked what shifts he could, piecing together freelance construction gigs, but keeping Liam cared for meant juggling schedules that rarely aligned and finances that were perpetually strained. He remembered Clara's laugh, her easy smile, the way she could soothe Liam with just a look. He missed her terribly. He missed having a partner to share the load, the worries, the small triumphs of raising a child. Now, it was just him and Liam against the world, or so it felt most days. The neighborhood grocery store, a few blocks away, was a necessary evil. It meant navigating aisles with a stroller or carrying Liam, dealing with the logistics of shopping while simultaneously being a full-time parent. Today, he needed formula and a few basics. It was a simple task, one he'd done 100 times. Yet the prospect always brought a fresh wave of anxiety. What if Liam started crying? What if he couldn't find what he needed quickly? What if? The worries were relentless, a low hum beneath the surface of his exhaustion. He stood up, adjusting Liam again. The baby whimpered, his face scrunching slightly before smoothing out. "Almost there, buddy," Marcus murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of the soft, downy head. He pulled his thin coat tighter, though it offered little warmth, and began the walk towards the store, the familiar knot of tension tightening in his stomach. He just needed to get in, get what he needed, and get out, hopefully before Liam woke up fully and announced his displeasure to the entire establishment. It was a small goal, but one that felt monumental in his current state. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store felt harsh and too bright after the muted afternoon light outside. The automatic doors hissed open, ushering Marcus and Liam into the sterile, overly air-conditioned space. He grabbed a small handbasket, thankful Liam was still asleep, allowing him the use of both hands for a moment. He navigated towards the baby aisle, the squeak of the basket wheels loud in the relatively quiet store. Finding the specific brand of formula was always a minor victory. He carefully placed the large container in the basket, adding a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. Simple necessities. He checked his list, that was it. A wave of relief washed over him. Quickest trip yet. He glanced down at Liam, still blessedly asleep, his tiny hand curled into a fist near his chin. Marcus allowed himself a small, tired smile. Maybe today would be easier than he'd braced himself for. He headed towards the front registers, the quiet hum of the refrigerators and the distant chatter of shoppers filling the air. He chose a line that seemed to be moving steadily. As he waited, Liam began to stir. A small sigh, then a stretch. Marcus shifted him in his arms, murmuring soft reassurances. Liam's eyes blinked open, wide and blue, and for a moment, he just looked around, taking in the strange, bright world of the grocery store. Then the whimper started. Low at first, a fragile sound that Marcus knew all too well. It was the sound of discomfort, of wanting something he couldn't articulate. Marcus began to gently pat Liam's back, trying to soothe him. The line inched forward. The whimper escalated into a fretful cry. Liam's face turned red, his lower lip trembling. Marcus bounced him slightly, whispering, "It's okay, buddy, we're almost done, almost home." He reached the counter, the clerk, a young woman with a bored expression, waiting. He placed the items on the conveyor belt, juggling the baby and the basket. Liam's cries intensified, morphing into loud, distressed wails that echoed in the quiet space around them. Marcus felt his own heart rate accelerate, the familiar rush of stress and helplessness washing over him. He needed to pay, he needed to comfort his son, he needed to leave. All at once, he fumbled in his pocket for his wallet. Liam arched his back, crying harder. Marcus instinctively focused all his attention on the baby, trying to rock him, shushing him softly, desperately. The clerk scanned the formula, the bread, the milk. The register beeped. Liam's crying was now a desperate, piercing shriek. Marcus needed both hands to hold him securely, to try and comfort him. His wallet was out now in his hand. But Liam was inconsolable. Marcus's mind narrowed to one focus: the baby. He needed to soothe him, to get him out of this overwhelming environment. He couldn't hold the wallet and bounce and pat effectively. Without thinking, his primary instinct kicking in, Marcus placed his wallet down on the counter, right beside the register. He needed his hands free for Liam. He shifted Liam, holding him close, patting his back with a firm, rhythmic motion, swaying side to side. His entire body language screamed paternal distress and focus. The clerk finished scanning, perhaps distracted by the crying baby, or simply going through the motions. She bagged the bread and milk, but she left the large container of formula sitting beside the scanner. She glanced at Marcus, who was completely absorbed in trying to quiet his son, tears starting to well up in Liam's eyes from the force of his crying. The clerk looked back at her screen, maybe waiting for payment, but Marcus was already turning slightly, focused on the baby, his patting growing more urgent. His world had shrunk to the small, distressed human in his arms. Everything else faded away. The need to pay, the items on the counter, even his wallet sitting there, none of it registered compared to the immediate, overwhelming need of his son. He murmured soothing words, his back now partially turned to the counter as he moved slightly, trying to find a rhythm that would calm Liam. The clerk, seeing him turn away, didn't call out. Perhaps she assumed he was going to grab bags, or was just stepping aside. Or perhaps she was as overwhelmed by the crying as Marcus was, and simply wanted him to leave. Whatever her reasoning, she did not remind him about the formula, nor did she point out his wallet still on the counter. Marcus, his hand automatically patting Liam's back, his entire being focused on calming the wailing child, simply walked away from the counter. He moved towards the exit, needing fresh air, needing quiet, needing anything to stop the heartbreaking cries of his son. He didn't realize the formula was left behind. He didn't realize his wallet, containing his cash and cards, sat exposed on the counter. His only reality was the warm, shaking body in his arms and the desperate sound filling his ears. He was just reaching the automatic doors when a voice, sharp and loud, cut through the sound of Liam's crying and the general store noise. "Hey, stop right there." Marcus paused, startled. He turned, still patting Liam, whose crying momentarily hitched at the sudden noise. A large man in a security uniform was striding purposefully towards him, his face set in a stern, accusatory expression. Behind him, the young clerk was pointing towards Marcus, her face pale. "Sir, I need you to come back here," the security guard said, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable tone of authority and suspicion. Marcus felt a jolt of fear mixed with confusion. What's wrong? You know what's wrong. You walked out with merchandise you didn't pay for." The security guard's eyes flicked from Marcus to the crying baby, then back to Marcus's face, lingering with what felt like immediate judgment. "What? No, I paid. Marcus started, his mind racing, trying to recall the transaction through the haze of stress and Liam's cries. Paid? Had he paid? He fumbled at his pocket instinctively for his wallet, to show a receipt, but his pocket was empty. His stomach dropped. "Where's your receipt, sir?" the guard pressed, stepping closer. I must have put it away," Marcus stammered, bouncing Liam, who had started crying again, louder this time, sensing the tension. "Wait, I just need to find my wallet." He patted his pockets again, a rising panic beginning to set in. "Your wallet is right there on the counter," the clerk interjected, her voice trembling slightly. She pointed to the register where he had been standing, and there it was, his wallet sitting in plain sight. A cold dread washed over Marcus. He hadn't paid. He had been so focused on Liam, he had put his wallet down, forgotten it, and walked out. He looked back at the counter, then at the security guard, then at the formula still sitting next to the scanner. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered, the realization hitting him. "I am so sorry. My son was crying. I was trying to comfort him. I completely forgot. I put my wallet down to... Oh, I'm so sorry." He took a step back towards the counter, ready to grab his wallet and pay immediately, shame burning in his cheeks. But the security guard didn't step aside. Instead, he moved to block Marcus's path. Forgot? Or decided to walk out hoping nobody noticed? The guard's tone was disbelieving, his eyes hard. "You walked off and left your wallet? That's a new one. Looks more like you were trying to make a clean getaway and dropped it." "No, that's not it at all," Marcus protested, his voice rising. Slightly in desperation, Liam flinched at the noise. Marcus instantly softened his tone. "Please, mister. My son is distressed. I just had a lapse. I have the money. My wallet is right there. I can pay now." "Sir, you're being aggressive," the guard said, his hand moving towards his sidearm. It wasn't an aggressive tone Marcus was using. It was a desperate, flustered one. The voice of a man at his wit's end, trying to be heard over a screaming baby while being falsely accused. But to the guard, perhaps seeing Marcus's agitation, his worn clothes, his focus on the baby interpreted as furtiveness, it was enough to escalate. The accusation of aggressive stung Marcus, feeling like a deliberate mischaracterization of his stress and panic. "Aggressive? I'm holding my baby," Marcus exclaimed, trying to keep his voice down. But the absurdity of the accusation was shocking. "I just want to pay for my items." Other shoppers had stopped, watching the scene unfold. Hushed whispers started to ripple through the aisles. Marcus felt exposed, humiliated. Liam continued to scream, amplifying Marcus's own distress. "All right, sir, this is how it's going to go," the guard said, his voice firm, ignoring Marcus's pleas. "You're going to come with me to the back office. We're going to involve the authorities." "The authorities?" Marcus stared, stunned. "For forgetting to pay when my wallet is right there? When I offered to pay. You attempted to leave the premises with unpaid merchandise," the guard stated, as if reciting from a manual. "That's theft, aggravated by your uncooperative and aggressive behavior." "I'm not aggressive," Marcus insisted, taking a small step back. Liam buried his face in Marcus's shoulder, his cries muffled but still intense. This was a nightmare. A simple trip to the store had become a public accusation of theft, compounded by a false claim of aggression. All because his son was crying and he was overwhelmed. He was taken to a small, windowless office in the back. The manager, a stern-looking woman, arrived and listened impassively to the security guard's account, punctuated by Liam's cries. Marcus tried to explain again, calmly as he could, bouncing the still sobbing baby. He pointed out his wallet, which the guard had retrieved and placed on the manager's desk. He pleaded with them to understand the chaos of juggling a distressed infant. But they seemed uninterested in his explanation. The security guard repeated his claim of Marcus being aggressive. The manager frowned at Liam's crying, as if it were an inconvenience or further evidence of Marcus's supposed instability. They noted he had no receipt. Of course he hadn't paid yet. The clerk confirmed Marcus had walked away without the formula. The narrative was set. Attempted theft, caught in the act, attempting to resist with aggression. Despite his pleas, despite the obvious presence of his wallet with money in it on the desk, they called the police. What happened next felt like a blur of cold, impersonal procedures. The police arrived. Marcus, still holding his baby, was questioned again. His attempts to explain were met with skepticism. The accusation of aggression was repeated by the security guard. Marcus felt utterly helpless, trapped by the system and the store's immediate assumption of guilt. Liam, exhausted from crying, eventually fell into a fitful sleep in Marcus's arms, his small body trembling occasionally. Marcus held him tight, feeling a fierce protectiveness that was tinged with despair. How could this be happening? How could a moment of distraction, born from trying to comfort his son, lead to this? He was formally arrested, handcuffed, gently while holding Liam. It was surreal, humiliating. They arranged for a neighbor Marcus had called to come pick up Liam. Handing his son over was the hardest part, seeing the confusion and fear in the neighbor's eyes. Marcus felt a crushing weight of failure. He was supposed to protect Liam, and instead he was being taken away, facing criminal charges. The following weeks were a nightmare of legal consultations, court appearances, and the constant, gnawing worry about Liam. The charge was petty theft, elevated slightly by the store's claim of his aggressive behavior during the stop. His public defender seemed overworked, initially skeptical of his story. "Walked away and left your wallet? Sir, that's unusual." Marcus explained again and again about Liam, about the crying, about the overwhelming stress. He felt judged by everyone he encountered, the police, the clerks at the court, even some of his own acquaintances who heard whispers of the charge. The initial judgment, the swift condemnation at the store, seemed to echo in every interaction. He felt his reputation, already fragile from the difficulties of single parenthood and precarious employment, being shredded. His lawyer, a pragmatic woman named Brenda, listened patiently to his story. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the quiet desperation beneath his calm demeanor. She pressed him on the details, the wallet, the crying baby, the exact moment he turned away. Something about his consistent, simple account resonated with her. "Okay," she said finally after their third meeting. "Let's request the security footage. If what you say happened, the camera should show it." Requesting the footage added delays. The store was reluctant to release it initially, citing policy. Brenda had to file motions, argue in court. Marcus waited, the anxiety a constant companion. He worked when he could, visited Liam, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the upcoming trial loomed like a dark cloud. The trial date arrived. Marcus sat beside Brenda, feeling exposed and vulnerable in the courtroom. The prosecution, representing the state based on the store's complaint, presented their case. The security guard testified, reiterating his version of events, emphasizing Marcus's alleged aggression and failure to produce a receipt. The young clerk testified, confirming Marcus left without the item and didn't pay, though her account of his demeanor was less harsh than the guard's. The manager spoke about store policy and loss prevention. Marcus listened, a cold knot in his stomach. Their story sounded so clear, so simple. Man tried to steal, got caught, acted aggressive. It omitted the crucial context, the overwhelming reality of his life at that moment, the complete absorption in his child's distress. He felt like a caricature, stripped of his humanity, reduced to a criminal defendant. Brenda's cross-examination was sharp but quiet. She focused on the sequence of events, the exact timing, the position of the wallet, the baby's crying. She highlighted the guard's quick jump to aggression, asking if he had considered other possibilities. She asked the clerk if Marcus seemed distracted, if the baby was crying loudly. The clerk admitted the baby was very loud, and Marcus seemed stressed. Then, it was Brenda's turn to present Marcus's defense. She didn't put Marcus on the stand immediately. Instead, she called the store manager back and, much to the prosecution's visible annoyance, requested the security footage be played for the jury. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. A large screen flickered to life, displaying the mundane view of the grocery store aisle and checkout area from an overhead camera. It was a different perspective, a silent, objective witness. Marcus felt his heart pound in his chest. This was it. The truth, unvarnished by interpretation or prejudice, was about to be laid bare. The footage began, showing Marcus entering the frame, a baby in his arms. It showed him navigating the aisle, placing items in his basket. The jury watched impassively, their faces neutral. Then he moved to the checkout. The baby stirred. As the footage played, Brenda narrated softly, guiding the jury's attention. Here is Mr. Thorne approaching the register. Note the infant in his arms. He places the basket on the ground. He attempts to manage the items and the baby. Liam on the screen began to stir more urgently. His face started to scrunch up. On the real Marcus, sitting at the defense table, the memory was visceral. He watched his past self on the screen, the tension in his shoulders visible even from this angle, his focus already beginning to narrow. The clerk started scanning. The baby on screen began to cry. First a whimper, then building quickly. The sound wasn't playing in the courtroom, but the visual was powerful. Liam's face turned red. His body tensed. Marcus on screen bounced him, patted him, his attention clearly fixed on the distressed child. Watch closely. Brenda's voice was calm, deliberate. Mr. Thorne is reaching for his wallet. The baby is crying harder now. Watch his hands. He needs both hands to comfort his son. See? He places the wallet down on the counter. Right there, next to the register. The jury's eyes were glued to the screen. They saw Marcus put the wallet down. They saw him shift his grip on the baby, pulling the child closer, patting his back with focused intensity. The clerk continues to scan, Brenda narrated. Bread, milk, and the formula. Watch the formula. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it clearly showed the clerk scanning the large container. She places the bread and milk in bags. But the formula, watch. She leaves it right there, beside the scanner. On screen, Marcus was now entirely focused on the baby, swaying slightly, his body language one of complete absorption in the task of comforting his son. His back was slightly turned to the counter. Mr. Thorne's attention is solely on his son, Brenda explained. His wallet is on the counter. The paid items are bagged. The unpaid item is left behind. He turns, still patting the baby's back, still focused entirely on soothing his child, and he walks away. He did not look back at the counter. He did not pick up his wallet. He did not attempt to conceal the item. The footage continued as Marcus reached the doors and was stopped by the security guard. They saw the guard approach, saw Marcus turn, his posture defensive because he was holding a baby and being confronted, not aggressive in any threatening sense. They saw him patting his empty pockets. They saw the guard point to the wallet on the counter. Brenda stopped the footage. Silence hung in the courtroom, broken only by the faint sounds from the hallway outside. The jury looked at the screen, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. Their faces were no longer neutral. There was dawning understanding, and in some eyes, something that looked like horror or regret. The prosecution, flustered, objected. Objection. Counsel is leading the jury. Overruled, the judge said, his voice quiet but firm. The footage speaks for itself. Brenda turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw was not a man attempting to steal. It was a father, overwhelmed and distracted by the needs of his distressed infant, making a mistake. He forgot an item. He forgot his wallet. His focus was entirely on his son. The store's employee forgot to bag the item and failed to alert him when he walked away. The security guard interpreted a father's stress and confusion as aggression. This was not criminal intent. This was a moment of human frailty and a misunderstanding compounded by a lack of empathy. She sat down. The prosecution had a chance for rebuttal, trying to argue that forgetting a wallet was implausible, that Marcus should have been more aware. But their arguments felt hollow after the undeniable visual evidence. Brenda called Marcus to the stand. He testified simply, calmly, about the stress of single parenting, about Liam's crying, about his sole focus being his son in that moment. He explained putting his wallet down to have his hands free, the sudden need to get Liam out of the store. He looked at the jury, his eyes tired but steady. I would never steal, he said softly, especially not with my son right there. All I wanted was to comfort him and go home. The defense rested. The closing arguments were made. Brenda's was powerful, focusing on the footage, on empathy, on the danger of judging too quickly based on appearance or circumstances. The prosecution stuck to the facts as they initially appeared. Item left unpaid, no receipt, attempted departure, perceived aggression. The jury retired to deliberate. Marcus sat, tense, trying to breathe. His future, his ability to provide for Liam, everything. hinged on whether 12 strangers could look past the initial accusation and see the simple, difficult truth revealed by the silent video. Hours passed. The wait was agonizing. He thought of Liam, safe at the neighbors. He thought of Clara, wishing she were here, wishing she could make sense of this senseless situation. He thought of the shame, the public humiliation, the label of thief and aggressor. Finally, the jury returned. The courtroom grew silent, the air thick with anticipation. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the jury members' faces, trying to read their expressions, but they were carefully blank. The foreman stood. The judge asked for the verdict. On the charge of petty theft, the foreman's voice was clear and strong. We the jury find the defendant, Marcus Thorne, not guilty. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief crashed over Marcus. He exhaled, a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Tears sprang to his eyes. He was not a thief. He was free. Then came the surprising moment. The jury had a request. Could they see the security footage again? The judge, slightly nonplussed, agreed. The lights dimmed, and the silent, monochrome video played once more. They watched Marcus, focused on his son, placing the wallet down. They watched the clerk leave the formula. They watched Marcus turn, patting the baby, and walk towards the door. They watched the confrontation. As the tape played, something shifted in the jury box. Shoulders slumped. Hands covered mouths. On the second viewing, as they saw the overwhelmed father, the crying baby, the forgotten wallet, the simple mistake, the swift, harsh judgment, 3 of the jurors began to cry, quietly, wiping away tears with tissues provided by the bailiff. What happened next was profound. The judge, seeing the jury's reaction, paused. He spoke directly to the court. "Let this be a lesson," he said, his voice resonating. "To look beyond the surface, to seek the full truth, to remember the burdens that others may carry, often unseen, and to exercise empathy before judgment." Marcus sat, tears streaming down his own face now, not just from relief, but from the unexpected validation, the profound empathy shown by these strangers. They had seen him, not the accused criminal but the struggling father. They had seen the truth. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. The store's representatives, including the security guard and manager, avoided his gaze. The store issued a quiet apology later and reportedly reviewed their security and customer service procedures, though no one was formally charged with any wrongdoing regarding the incident itself. For Marcus, the apology felt inadequate compared to the weeks of hell he had endured, but the vindication in court was everything. His name was cleared. The whispers faded, replaced by a quiet respect from those who knew him or had heard the story. The neighbor who had cared for Liam hugged him fiercely. Brenda, his lawyer, became a friend. The experience left its scars, a heightened wariness of being misunderstood, a deeper appreciation for kindness. But it also showed him something powerful. The truth, when finally revealed, could cut through prejudice and assumption. It showed him that even when you feel most alone and judged, there are those who will see the real you, given the chance. What happened next for Marcus wasn't a sudden rise to fame or fortune. It was quieter, more profound. He continued to work, to raise Liam, but with a renewed sense of dignity. He had faced down injustice, not with aggression, but with quiet endurance, and his truth had ultimately set him free. The security footage, that silent witness to a father's struggle, had become his unlikely champion, a testament to the fact that what appears to be one thing can, with context and empathy, be revealed as something else entirely. His story became a quiet legend in his community, a reminder that everyone has a story, a burden, a moment of struggle that others might misinterpret. It was a stark illustration that judgment without understanding is a dangerous thing, and that sometimes the most powerful evidence isn't in words, but in the simple, unspoken truth of what happened, captured in a quiet, unblinking lens. The strength of a person isn't always measured in how loudly they can assert themselves, but in how quietly they can endure, how deeply they can love, and how steadfastly they can hold on to their truth even when the world tries to tell them they are something they are not. Marcus, the father with the crying baby and the forgotten wallet, had shown them all that. So what can we learn from Marcus's ordeal? We learn that quick judgments, often based on appearance or immediate circumstance, can be profoundly wrong and deeply harmful. We learn that empathy is not just a feeling, but an active choice, a choice to consider what unseen burdens someone might be carrying before we cast our stones. We see that true strength often lies in resilience, in maintaining dignity and focusing on what truly matters in Marcus's case. His son, even when facing overwhelming pressure and false accusations. We understand the critical importance of truth and evidence, and how objective facts can dismantle narratives built on prejudice and assumption. Marcus's story is a powerful reminder that every person deserves to be seen, truly seen, beyond labels and stereotypes. It is a call to pause, to look closer, to ask questions, and to seek understanding before delivering a verdict. It is a testament to the hidden potential, the quiet integrity, and the profound love that can exist within those we might otherwise overlook or misjudge. Let this story encourage you. Encourage you to be slow to judge. Encourage you to look for the full picture, to listen with your heart as well as your ears. Encourage you to remember that kindness and understanding can illuminate truths that anger and prejudice keep hidden. Share this story and let its message resonate. That the most powerful truth is often found not in the loudest accusation, but in the quiet, undeniable reality of what happened.